I'll give it like a couple seconds until it starts. Okay, so is the audio okay on your end? Is it this
Yep,
working
sounds
okay?
good on my end. I got the recording up. We're good to go.
Perfect, man. This is fantastic. Clay Martin, great to meet you because we have never met. This is the first time we're talking, right?
It is, man. Great to meet you too, brother.
Fantastic. Great to have you here. And it's pretty awesome. We were talking with Matt Bracking. We do these live streams on weekends, and he told me about your books. I read the first one halfway through. The second one, but man, it's very relevant stuff. Especially giving the second book you wrote it. You finished writing it this year, right?
This year, right? So basically, the way it went, the sequence. And it's kind of funny because you started writing this back in 2008, 2009, your books when that collapse was going on, and that was kind of where oh shit, did you just freeze again?
Yeah, I just froze a little bit, but that's okay. That's fine.
Anyway, that was kind of like the time frame where you started writing, kind of getting into this and kind of sharing your knowledge with your blog and stuff. And I actually read a bunch of your blog back in the day, but it was like nothing that I had really, I would say, seriously contemplated for over here. I was still in the Army. I was still worried about overseas stuff. So fast forward all these years later, I guess it was the summer of 2019. I actually started writing Concrete Jungle then, which is the urban survival book.
Yeah.
That was based on. I moved over to Oregon for a little bit, which I think most people at this point in the United States recognize like a hotbed of chaos and Antifa and all this other stuff.
Yeah.
But anyway, when I was living over there, I saw some things that are just really weird. You saw the things that everybody sees on the Portland side, the Antifa and all that stuff, and the disregard for government. But you also see something that like I've never seen like people actually put out on Front Street. You see like 1488 bumper stickers and like all like the real hardcore neo-Nazis are just like out in public flying their colors too. And that really leads you to like look at this like, oh my God, here are two irreconcilable forces that are just pressed up against each other, and this like that's waiting to go hot.
Yeah.
So that was when I started Concrete Jungle, which is the urban survival guide. I really looked at that one from the perspective of what if you're just the dude that doesn't want to be involved with either one of these, but it's coming to your door anyway.
Yeah.
So started writing that one, and at that time I was also under a publishing contract for my fiction books, which meant everything else too. And no major publisher would touch it.
Yeah. that's kind of what ends up happening. Yeah.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, you know this well from being in this space as well, and Matt Bracken, our buddy there too. Nobody wants anything to do with this stuff. There have been a few survival books that like made it mainstream, and they got published by Simon and Schuster or whoever, and they did really. Most of them are like 10, 15 years old.
Yeah.
Nobody in the modern era really wants to touch it. So I kind of shelved it, and all this other stuff happened. Basically, I got out of my contract earlier this year. It expired, and going into right after like the first weekend of the George Floyd riots, that's when I was like, oh, wait a minute. And I was very fortunate in this regard too, as not a lot of people know this. I had a house fire last year in January, lost everything.
Man, that sucks.
Oh, it was terrible. It was terrible, and would have lost the book too, except I had emailed it to a friend just to kind of like look over and see if he thought it was something that could go forward, and he still had it. So I had like 90% of the book written as the George Floyd riots like really broke out. Right. So went ahead and published Concrete Jungle, and there's some things in it as you read too. You can see where like maybe things would have been fleshed out more if I had a longer process to finish it. But I really felt like people had to have that one like right now.
Yeah.
So put that one out, and then as I was sitting there thinking about it too, especially when you look at the geography of the United States and the makeup of the people of the United States, there were a lot of things missing for the guys that don't live in the city proper, that live either in the suburbs or they live in the actual rural areas. So I spent about 4 months as fast as I could putting together what I kind of saw as what's coming, which is very potentially like a civil war between red counties and blue counties. Even if that starts like a low-grade guerrilla war, which I think it will, I see that conflict coming. And so that's what Prairie Fire was written specifically to address.
Man, that's awesome. Well, if for guys that don't know about this, you're a former Marine, then you moved towards Army Special Forces, correct? Is that right?
Right. Yeah. So basically, I had an idiotic, almost unbelievable career because I'm a because I'm a glutton for punishment, I guess, or I make bad life choices or something. I don't know. But yeah, I started my military career infantry guy, and then I was a reconnaissance Marine, which was before all this MARSOC or whatever, kind of like their special forces. I was a sniper for the Marine Corps as well. Uh, at about my 5 year mark, I cross-decked and I went over to the Army and joined Special Forces, and I finished up the rest of my career in 3rd Special Forces Group.
Right. One of my long-time best buddies, he's Marine Recon. He was in Fallujah. So he's the classic Marine,
Oh
very
yeah,
much a,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, very
Odds
much.
are pretty good that I know him because this is one of those like, did I make the right choice things? When Fallujah was having the big battle of Fallujah, I was in the Special Forces Q course doing some nonsense like the NCO Academy or some bullshit. And I look up at the news and there's like my boys running through the streets of Fallujah and like, ooh, did I make a bad choice here? Did I make a bad
He was
choice?
he was in some deep. I mean, he saw a lot of combat. He definitely was there. Well, he ended up with some serious injuries in his feet because of the weight he was carrying. Ironically enough, he wasn't
Yeah.
shot, survived that, but the injuries in his feet were pretty bad, and that followed him since then. And my other buddy, he was Army Special Forces. Who he used to get pissed when anyone said Green Beret. He says, "No, we're Army Special Forces."
Don't show him the cover of my book then.
That's an accessory. He says that's an accessory. We're Army Special Forces, and he always told me that they're like instructors because they drop by in these places and they train the people that are going to be the local the local allies, the local buddies, and he talked about that being more like a instructor teacher job, and that's a lot of what it involves is Army Special Forces. Is that something that would be correct?
Pretty much. Things kind of changed in the War on Terror because we had to pick up another role that we also have. It's kind of a weird deal because especially like pre GWAT or pre War on Terror, I mean that was the primary mission, and there's also some other things that go along with that that are kind of unspoken. Like you're going to have access to places because you're there to train their guys or whatever. Just like during Panama back in the 80s. A huge chunk of Noriega's forces actually didn't fight because they were friends with the 7th Group guys. That's their areas down in South America. And the night before the war started, 7th team went and found their friends and were like, "Hey, I know you're a colonel in the armor regiment or whatever, but like let's just sit this one out because here's what's going to happen." And they were like, "Cool, man." But that's kind of like those personal relationships, and it actually probably changed the order of battle for Panama. So that is very much true. That is the primary mission, is to go and train other people. What we saw in the War on Terror for the first time, probably in a lot of ways since Vietnam. There was some of this going on in Colombia and some other places like that during the 80s. But for once, we were actually building our armies and going to war with them. I had a hand in the creation and fighting with like the Iraqi counterterrorism forces, Iraqi commandos, all that kind of thing. But yeah, that's the primary job, is build your own little army and go do stuff with it.
And you also were intelligence officer. Did I read that right? Is that correct?
I was a Special Forces intelligence sergeant. So the way an operational detachment alpha or a Special Forces team is broken down is it has a variety of MOSs. There's 4 primary ones, which is you have a weapons guy that knows how to shoot mortars, that kind of thing. You have a demolition / build stuff / supply guy. That's your Charlie. So his job is both blowing things up as well as like being able to build things like building a camp, digging wells, that kind of thing. Because again, if you show up somewhere with like dudes that don't really know what they're doing, maybe they're not very well educated, that kind of thing. You have to instill in them like this ability of hygiene, this ability to actually self-function.
Right.
And,
having water.
Right. By having water, having latrines, having fortifications, that kind of thing. Things that we think of like a Western army. You go somewhere like Africa where they've never heard of that. like it's a whole different animal as far as like building a functional fighting force.
Correct.
Yeah, you have your medic, obviously, because you have to have those. So special forces medic, and then a communications sergeant. The other three MOSs after that is a captain, a team sergeant, and as an intelligence sergeant. So you have to do, I think it's like 5 years of one of the first four MOSs before you can become an intelligence sergeant, because that's basically a step on the way to being a team sergeant. So yeah, it's kind of like an all-source analyst that's located like at the team level. But yeah, I was one of those too.
Awesome. And you were in comms before that, is that correct?
Yes. Yeah, my primary MOS coming out of the Special Forces course was I was the radio guy for the team. 18
Nice. Echo. Nice. That's awesome. I mean, I have, sorry if I don't know a lot of this stuff, I have no idea. I just, know what my friends tell me about that. That's all I understand. But it's very interesting because you obviously see that it's a very tight-knit community. You kind of recognize each other, and you see it, when I was visiting my buddies in Texas, you saw how they nodded at one another, like in gas stations or stuff like that. It's the haircut, it's the freaking boots, it's something, but it's always something that tells.
It's, to me, it's usually there's something like almost weird and unspoken about like the body language, and you see this from cops too. Cops can always spot other cops, and most of us that have been around and kind of maybe ran in some gray circles where we can usually spot cops too.
Yeah.
But it's kind of the same thing with any of your subgroups, I feel like. But yeah, we can almost always spot one another, pretty much across like the special operations board.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I've been in different countries, and I can always tell if someone is military or if someone is a cop. 9 times out of 10, even the Blippi guy. Do you know who Blippi is?
Yes. Yeah, Blippi, the kid show.
The kid show. That guy is military. I think he was Army or something. I told my wife, there's something about the way he moves, the way he's always talking about, firemen, cops, and all, that guy has something to do. And in fact, I checked him out. He does. So it's curious. It's very interesting.
I've got little kids that watch Blippi. I'm gonna have to dig into this now. I had not thought of that with Blippi, but I knew something was weird. So I'm gonna have to look into this. That's a very good point. I hadn't thought of him being an Army dude or something, but yeah, that makes a lot of sense actually.
Yeah, he was, and he wasn't like. I don't know if he was much combat. In general, when I find like a cop that is kind of hard to tell that he's a cop, he's usually not all that good at it, or he just doesn't like firearms, or he's somewhat of a lefty kind of cop.
Right. He wants to do some paperwork instead of.
Yeah, exactly, that sort of thing. But anyway, man, it's awesome, guys. I'll leave the links for Clay's books below for you guys to check it out. But man, so you're basically worried about things escalating from this point, right? Would that be a correct assessment?
Oh yeah. This is one of those, like, it's easy to put on the tinfoil hat and just start making up all kinds of crazy stuff, but you also can't deny what you're seeing with your own eyes sometimes. Yeah. And you got to kind of keep those two things balanced. But I see this going very badly. And that was, it's one of the things about going back to like Concrete Jungle, the urban survival book. I wrote that a year before all this stuff kicked off. And even as I was writing, I'm like, am I crazy? Like, if I lost it, like, I mean, come on, man, there's just no way. And then it actually ended up in a lot of ways being worse than I even predicted. And
you thought I was crazy, right? When you read my stuff, you thought I was nuts.
Right. I thought maybe you were a little off the deep end. And it turns out that, I went exactly that road. And, when it came out, my book, people were like, oh my God, you're like Nostradamus. Like, well, no, it turns out that everywhere I've been in the world, it follows these patterns and these steps. I wasn't sure that it would happen here, but it has. Yeah. And then, same thing going forward with the Civil War part. I think probably a lot of us saw that they were going to steal the election back in like July or August. I mean, I certainly did. In fact, it's in the book, which was published before the election. I kind of saw this happening, and it's again one of those things where you think like, maybe that was too far. And no, that's exactly how it's going down. So I very much see this escalating, and especially with the manner in which the election was stolen, I just don't see a way out of this that doesn't end badly.
The people they're placing in positions of authority and managing stuff. I mean, they're pretty much giving away a lot of it to the BLM and the Antifas, which makes sense because they are the ones that were, owning the streets for them in some way,
Right.
and they have to pay back. They have to give back to that, right?
You gotta pay your bribes, or else they won't listen to you next time. You can only not pay your dues once.
Yeah, it's so telling because a lot of people thought this would never happen. I mean, if you had mentioned this like a couple years ago, and you would have said there will be commies on the streets in America, burning stuff down, looting, and marching with guns across the street. I mean, there's nothing wrong with having your guns on the street. The difference is that commies use their guns for oppression, not for freedom and liberty. And I don't know if this happened to you, but even in the gun forums, some fucking naive people would go like, "Oh, but now they're gun people, so they're on our side." No. They're thugs. They're criminals.
Right.
Gun has nothing to do with you, man.
Right. Well, yeah, I can really take two things from what you're saying there. One, I mean, this shows the naiveness of myself and kind of how as a military dude you get focused on outward problems, not inward problems. I really thought the threat of communism was over in like 1992. Like Wolfell, like, okay, everything else is going to collapse. Cuba's going to eventually collapse. Like the communism shit is like so 1985. I did not see it resurging the way it has. And I mean, I was caught off guard big time by that, but it's out there. I mean, it's a mainstream belief now in the United States. I mean, probably look at what, 25-30% of people like, I mean, actually believe it. Like this is A-okay.
No, they think it's a good idea.
Yeah. Right. They're all about it. They're pushing it. And it's fucking crazy. It's hard to even wrap my brain around, but it's here and it's real. The second thing about what you're saying there is people never thought it could happen here. And I think that's a particular affliction of Americans. And I don't mean this in a bad way. I don't mean to say bad things about my countrymen, but traditionally from what I've seen, we travel less to foreign countries than anyone else. Maybe it's because we got two big ass oceans in between there, or whatever. But the majority of Americans, in my opinion, think of the entire rest of the world as a third world country. I mean, they don't understand things like, Lebanon was a first world country with it was the jewel of the Caribbean before 1979. Iran was, I mean, an absolutely first world country where people will go on vacation, Brits especially back in the 70s before the Shah. There are a lot of places, even in the last 30, 40 years that, rivaled us for infrastructure and income and whatever other kind of bullshit metric you want to make between to make a first world country that have just, devolved into anarchy. I mean, things that I'm sure their population didn't see coming either. So to think it can't happen here is foolish and naive.
Yeah, I've been doing this for a while now in terms of studying and learning from crappy shit happening to people in different places around the world, and it is super common. People, it's one of those things that you say, how is it possible that it catches you by surprise? But people usually will tend to believe that this cannot happen here.
Right.
It happens in our places. It doesn't happen here. For example, living in Argentina, we don't go around kidnapping people and cutting fingers off. That happens in Colombia,
right.
with the drug lords.
Right.
All of a sudden, you're getting your fingers chopped and sent through mail.
Right. Back when Colombia was borderline failed state. Yeah, that's like Somalia. But yeah.
Right.
Yeah, no, it's crazy, but I mean, it goes back to my point. Like, I don't think people understand how thin that veneer of civilization is. Yeah. You're even seeing some of that, I think, right now from the squishy right wing in American politics. You got all these chuckleheads talking about, well, we'll just vote again next time. We'll get them in 2024.
Yeah.
Hey, dumbass, it's fucking voting is over.
You know who thought that? Venezuelans thought that. Venezuelans thought they would vote Chavez out of office.
Right.
Germans thought they would vote Hitler out of office.
Right.
Doesn't happen.
Yeah, no. Happen. Yeah, dude, it's fucking crazy. Voting is fucking done. If we lose this one in the manner that we've lost it, there is no other solution. And the voting is fucking finished.
Yeah. Yeah. This guy I talked with in Venezuela, he told me that he had a year and a half worth of food when Chavez won. And he said it was still not enough. A year and a half of food was still not enough because the guy just, it's been 20 years. They've gone socialism, and 20 years later, they're still figuring it out.
That's absolute madness, isn't it? Yeah, it's nuts.
And a rich country, oil, they shouldn't be in this position, but they are.
Right.
So what is your advice for people watching this out, freaking out? What you would recommend folks doing if they're just waking up to all of this?
Well, man, dude, I'm actually, I want to go and say this too. I'm really glad that I'm on the show with you. It's you've been somebody I wanted to meet for a long time, but especially from an intellectual perspective now too. It's interesting to me to have this conversation with you because you lived through it as someone that was a resident of that place. I've only seen and dealt with this and looking at this from the perspective of being an invader.
Right.
Basically when I was dealing with these things or helping like my Iraqi factions towards survival. At the end of the day, I got to go home in 6 months or 9 months. And
exactly, it's different, man. It's different.
It is very different and well supplied by Uncle Sugar's machine. And no matter what, unless, I got shot in the fucking head, like I was leaving and it wasn't permanently going to be my problem. Right. We're looking at this in an entirely different way here because, like I say in my books too, like if the United States falls, there's nowhere to run. Like, This is it. This was the last bastion of potential, freedom. So my advice for people just getting into this is, oh wow, well, when you're in a bad spot, if you woke up this morning like, let me get ready. I'm sure you back that up too. That's another funny thing about it between Concrete Jungle and Prairie Fire. Concrete Jungle was written with the idea that we might have 4 or 5 years to get ready. So it's got all these long-term plans in it, like, start doing this and all this other stuff. It takes a long time, the skills to build. Prairie Fire was written much, much more urgently, and that's where we are today. Man, get you a blaster, get all the ammo you can for it. Don't spend all your money on guns and ammo, though. I think the thing that people miss the most is calories matter a lot. You gotta have food and sustainability of food. And it's crazy the potential ways that this could go too. From the pandemic and all this other bullshit, like starvation's been a weapon in warfare for what 600-700 years at least.
Yes.
I was reading something the other day that there hasn't been a famine that actually should have killed people, they say, in 1,000 years. Everything, to include like the Irish potato famine, was actually up there to feed people. It's just that the government or the strongman or who was in control took a huge share for, to sell elsewhere for money or whatever bullshit. Yeah.
Yeah, it was in the case of the Irish. Well, what's called the Irish famine was actually a genocide. The thing is this: when you get to write history, you can kind of adjust it whatever way you want. But the truth is that they had record numbers of crops during that same year. They just shipped it out of the country, man. And they wouldn't allow them. If they're not being allowed to eat, they're basically starving you to death. So the potato blight, the idea that, it was just a bad year of crops and all of a sudden everyone's. No, the thing is, Irish are rugged people, and they were not easily controlled. And the way of submitting them was starving half the country to death, basically.
Right.
And it worked. A lot of them ended up leaving, and eventually they had their revolution and they won. The only part that remains part of UK is Northern Ireland, which is a small part northeast. The rest of it is a completely different country. It's Republic of Ireland. And man, they had to fight for that. It's it's the only way you get freedom.
Right. Fought for a very long time. And one of those stories again of against surprising odds actually managed to win.
Yeah.
And something I've been saying that's very unpopular here too. And believe me, it was unpopular for me to even start to think this way, having grown up in a counterterrorism world where a lot of the doctrine was taught or developed by the British and the SAS, and Irish are always the bad guys for that shit. You better believe that.
They're always awful.
They fought for 20, 30 years. But one thing you have to say about the Irish, you might not like their methods, but it did work.
Yeah. Well, they are fighting. They believe in what they're doing, and man, it's just not. I mean, if you put yourself in that position, I mean, you're having these guys come at kicking your ass and kicking you around. No one's going to be liking that, and you're going to be resisting that as much as possible. So it's understandable, also in a way. But I think that what you're saying is so true in terms of people have this idea that this cannot happen here. We'll never see this. We'll never see communism in the streets of America. Yet you are seeing it. You're seeing them. It practically, I mean, it's not just a Democratic Party. I don't know if you agree with me or not, but this is something we talk with Matt a lot. A lot of the Republicans are either or corrupt or naive in thinking that they can negotiate with these people. And there's no negotiating with these folks.
Right. Oh, no, you're exactly right. I mean, this recent election has shown it, I think, more than anything else. Like, there's a huge chunk of the GOP, right wing of this country, that is bought and paid for. And, before, I think this year, you could look at like some of the Republicans that were, against Trump and his ideals or whatever, and maybe just say those are like old line dudes, or that was a different party. Right. I'm going to do. But the more I think about it now, the more I think, no, they're just globalist shills, just like the Democrats. They bought into the machine. They would be a token resistance, and that's all they want to do is who was it? Some radio host compared it to the Harlem Globetrotters and the teams they always play, the Washington Generals.
Yeah,
like
Matt did that comparison. Yeah.
Okay, but I mean, he's exactly right. That's all they want to do. They want to be a little token resistance that never actually has power and therefore never has to do anything, and get their piece of graft. And it's scary to think that you wake up one day all of a sudden and everybody's against you, and that's where we are. It's the people and a very few, maybe very slim minor factor of leaders against everyone else.
Yeah, the media, the big corporations, it's all pretty much on their side. So. And folks comment here in the channel, sometimes feeling a little bit hopeless or that we're negative. It's not that I have a negative view of things, but you have to keep it realistic. You cannot keep hoping. I mean, if you think that there's going to be some miracle so as to avoid this from happening, it's not going to be happening. If you think that 4 years from this, you're going to be solving 4 years of socialism spreading through your country, sorry, but it just doesn't work that way. So you better get prepared.
Oh, dude, you're exactly right. I can't remember if it's in the book or if it's just on my blog, but this is one of the things I said about like the Q fantasy. And I do call that very much a fantasy. If you look at this as the idea that Q was made as controlled opposition to keep people on the sidelines. Go back to like all the Q messaging. Because I looked at it when it first came out. I was like, I got to see if this is legit or not. The entire purpose of Q this entire time has been to make people believe that there's this mythical faction of government good guys, little fucking commandos and shit that are fighting behind the scenes. So you just need to stay home and decipher my codes. And don't do anything. Just decipher the codes, stay in your house, and it's under control. Yeah. That's a message of people that are trying to control you.
Yeah. And people like the idea of, it's all going to be working out okay. We're going to be fine.
Right. When, which, again, that's a good way to get buried. There's like a normalcy bias too.
Yeah.
I think people just think everything's always gone on along kind of this way, so it'll just keep going. And I just got to kind of keep my head down. Well, there are also, hard shifts and turns in history, and I really think that we're at one. This is an all or nothing kind of moment.
Yeah, I think it is. I think it is because I cannot think of a moment in which the United States was so permeated and infiltrated in so many ways by a very strong left-wing faction that has a very clear objective. I mean, you're talking about hardcore communists getting in office and running things.
You have to think about like the leaps and bounds that they have just grown this year, what they've actually managed to accomplish. And it's hard to remember all of it, but think about this. They've toppled all these statues, had them pulled down, had things renamed through violence. I mean, it wasn't like they went and voted their fucking town council. They tore the shit down with a fucking crane and basically bent the knee of like at least 6 or 7 state governments. They did some untold. It was like $500 million in damage to Minneapolis, just burning, looting, all this other shit, and got away with it. Like not one of them went to jail for it. Got away with it. And in fact, what shocked me the most when this shit started happening was then the major corporations like totally cucked and started sending them like astronomical amounts of money to like the Black Lives Matter leadership, like hundreds of millions of dollars, like Coca-Cola, Target, the NFL, Nike. I mean, it's staggering. I mean, it's staggering to think about. They basically paid the day in gold, and that was it. Like, okay, cool. Please don't hurt us anymore.
And it's all money that it's money that's going into paying bails for getting them out of prison, lawyers. I mean, it's all money going directly to fund the same terrorists that are basically attacking the country.
Right. Oh yeah, dude, 100%. It's crazy. I mean, it's absolutely nuts to think that they've gotten away with this, and they have 100% gotten away with it.
Yeah. What would you tell people that are, I mean, we've talked before in the show about folks looking at relocating to other states, because it seems that it will be quite important where you are. If you're in a blue state, it may end up affecting your life in ways that you don't want to go through. Which would be the states that you would recommend folks who are considering relocating?
Oh, and dude, man, I'm also 100% behind this, and I think dudes like Selko are 100% behind this too. I'm behind it mostly because I've seen it play out in real life. Like when we went to Iraq, starting off, there was a lot of like mixed Sunni and Shia neighborhoods, and that had kind of been okay because Saddam and his secret police had an absolute lock on that country. Like there was no unauthorized violence. Like you might get kidnapped in the fucking night, but you were at least going to Saddam's palace. It was because he said so. The minute that central authority eroded, I mean, you saw some just absolutely horrific things happen on both sides if you happen to have like a small population that was very outnumbered by the people that lived around it. So yeah, I'm very much about the balkanization. You've got to go where your team is. And it kind of sucks too right now though, because a lot of people that don't necessarily have the same ideals are moving to these same states, and it's got actually the potential of flipping the voting blocks there too. In fact, I kind of thought going into this that maybe they weren't going to steal this election, but they were using all this BLM stuff as like a long-term lever to push enough blue into the red areas to flip those in the electoral college. But getting back to the root of your question, if I was a red team guy and I had to move from like California, I would want to be going to Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, Texas, Oklahoma. I mean, Oklahoma's actually crazy. They're so conservative. I think it's the 10th election in a row. Every one of their counties has voted red. Like they did not screw around there.
Yeah. The thing is, it's going to be getting that polarized. You're going to be having very red states, and you're going to be having very blue states. And if you're caught in one of those very blue states, you're going to be screwed, because unless you believe in that, I mean, if you're a commie, stay right there. You are in your own home. That's going to be great for you.
Be sure to fly your colors, and might not push up against the wall, but they might. Whatever. It depends on if you had a wrong think one time or not. But yeah.
Yeah, but. And this is something that a lot of people struggle with. I get emails from people all the time about, I'm in California, man, but this is my home. I've been living here for generations. I have my land. I have my family, my network. I cannot see myself leaving. So it's not easy. It's not an easy call to make.
No. I mean, and brother, you know that from your situation as well. I'm sure that even at the end, it probably wasn't easy to leave in a lot of ways.
Not at all.
I mean, I get it. It is tough, and you are leaving a lot of things behind, especially these people that are generationally there. But I mean, at some point you have to look at it like, is my position absolutely indefensible? Northern California, maybe not. But you're still going to have to deal with the boot of the state in a way that, like, I never will over here, at least not for a long time. There's some validity to stand and fight if it's feasible.
Right.
In fact, I think Oregon's actually probably the best example of that. Oregon is crazy because it's only the city of Portland and then like half the city of Bend that drive everything in that state politically. Everywhere else in that entire state is like hardcore red county, like good old boys. They would like nothing more than to push Portland into the sea.
Right.
In a purely like tactical scenario, entirely possible that Oregon's counties could stand up and absolutely kick the shit out of Oregon's blue counties. California, I mean, I think the population difference is so offset there that unless you're way up in the northern part where all the red counties reside, like I just think it's an indefensible position.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's one of the other topics you cover in your books, the idea of the rural folks versus the city folks. And I don't like, painting with a broad brush because I know that there's some great folks in the city and there's some crappy assholes in the country as well.
Right.
But it is going to be a little bit of a thing, right? There's going to be that conflict of, hey, we have the entire state that wants to stay conservative, that wants to remain American, and we have we have this population center that's always screwing us and getting the entire state going in on a left-wing agenda.
Right. Oh, no, yeah, I mean, 100% too, man. I mean, I feel that too, in that it sucks when this is one of the other reasons that like civil wars are so brutal. It sucks that it's like that, but it is like that. I mean, at some point you have to draw the line, like, if let's say in a hypothetical, like Idaho secedes, like, well, maybe you shouldn't take any more Californians in then. Maybe, it's tough decisions will have to be made. And, it's not a movie, man. Shit happens.
No, certainly. And one of the things you're seeing is, and I told people they're going to be moving a lot faster. That look what's happening already with guns in terms of the arm brace, if it's an illegal thing or not, and they want to rewrite. I mean, before they're even in office, they're already talking about rewriting what a firearm is or what a stock or grip.
Right.
They're already doing this.
Right. Oh no, dude, you're absolutely right. I mean, it's absolutely nuts too. This could actually be pointed at as one of the biggest failures of the Trump administration. Okay, so you're familiar with the bump stock thing?
Yeah, I know what. Yeah, and some people try to defend. I didn't defend him for that. I mean, he just didn't stand for the Second Amendment guys. That's just a fact as well.
Well, and here's the biggest problem with that. Like, I actually had to do a review on a bump stock one time. It's a pile of shit. I hate them. They're fucking retarded. I wish they would all fall off in the ocean, but I still feel like you should be able to have one if you want.
Exactly. That's the point.
Right. And where Trump screwed up in this is that's the first time, maybe ever, that old items were not grandfathered in. Even when like machine guns became illegal in 1934, you could still, if you had one prior to that, you could mail order a machine gun before that. Right. That time you could still go register it and get your stamp for free, if memory serves correctly, and you were okay. Every other weapon that's ever been banned has fallen in that same category, except bump stocks. You were just screwed on that one. That was like a destroy whatever. Yeah. And that's a terrible precedent. I mean, that's
exactly
precedent.
Sets a bad precedent, and we just did it last year. Let's just do it again. Let's reinterpret what automatic fire is. I mean, are you moving your finger too fast and going to be going after Jerry Mikulek and cutting off his finger because he just shoots so fast?
Right. You can't have a trigger that's under 3 pounds because you can shoot it too quickly. Like,
right.
But I mean, I think that's exactly the move they're going to make. I mean, the scary one to me is their plan to make you buy stamps for every 30-round magazine, AR-15, whatever other bullshit. I mean, the average gun dude in this country owed like, $200,000 in tax stamps. Like, that shit ain't going to happen.
Right. And is there one of the things I'm thinking of, and this is something we talk with Matt, that it's impossible to enforce this, but you have states that are very much blue and will very much willingly go and surrender their magazines, their guns. They will surrender everything.
Right.
And that keeps on dividing the country and setting precedents in different places. And they did it over there. We should be doing it over here as well, because we are also very liberal, open-minded
Right.
intellectuals.
Right. We saw it happen in New Jersey just a couple, maybe 2-3 years ago, when they banned anything over a 10-round magazine. And there was all this crazy shit that happened. Like, some people had to take them to like gun shops and put them in like the equivalent of a safe deposit box. It was still their property, but they couldn't touch it until like the legal adjudication was over.
That's
And
crazy.
yeah, all this fucking crazy shit. And if nothing else, too, I think we've just learned in the last 2 to 3 years, the judicial system is broken. It's not fair, and it's not going to help you. It's
right.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, it's awfully unfortunate. Are you worried, like, well, where you are do you see like in the education system? Because this is, I mean, I have 3 kids, from diapers, high school, university.
Yep.
Do you see, or are you concerned with how all of this is going to be affecting your kids, how they're going to be brainwashed in school, the kind of narrative? Because as we were talking before, they rewrite history. They make the good guys into bad guys, and yesterday's hero is an awful, evil bastard the next.
Right. Well, they call them Nazis. That's the catch-all label.
Nazis.
Yeah. No, dude, I mean, I'm very concerned about it, too. I have 2 kids, 2 boys that are 2 and 4. And this is, again, like, that's probably a lot of the catalyst for me to start looking at what's actually going on was them being born.
Right.
But yeah, dude, from what I've seen, we absolutely lost the long march through institutions. Like, the left kicked our ass on that side. They've taken over pretty much everything to do with education, higher education. All that stuff. To the point that, I mean, I wouldn't even consider sending my kids to public school.
Right. So you're planning on homeschooling? That would be the plan?
Yeah, that's my plan. I'm hoping that within the next year or so, I can make a small group of like, trusted associates, the same way I do for a lot of other things, and maybe we can all like have a hand in sharing the schooling, because I don't know if they had a lot of homeschooling where you're from. But we did have a fair bit of it where I'm at in Texas, or where I grew up in Texas, and you have to look at the balance point there. All the homeschool kids, for the most part, were weirdos because they didn't have any socialization.
Right.
Now, then I went to public school where we had good socialization, but even back then, the education standards were pretty bad. They were pretty low. So you kind of have to look at that balance point. The way I see to balance it is, like I said, hopefully find some other parents that think the same way. And that way also have my kids go be under someone else's authority that's not mine for a couple hours a day.
Right.
Learn to deal with other adults and learn how to deal with other little kids and their maybe not wildly, but somewhat different belief structure. That's important things to learn how to do.
Man, couldn't agree more. It's complicated. I mean, I've known kids that were homeschooled that were great, and as you say, I've known kids that were homeschooled. I mean, adults that were homeschooled, and they were socially, not okay. They just. One of the things I noticed is one guy in particular that I know that he had problems in school, so they decided to homeschool him so as to not have. And he just couldn't deal with, with conflict, and he just couldn't stand for himself. And one of the things, well, my kids have been moved, halfway around the world, like in different countries. So they become naturally very resilient and, stand for themselves. And, even at times having to tell them, you cannot punch this kid because in this country you will get expelled. And they would go like, oh, I didn't punch him. I just pushed him like this very little. And he just fell. Are you sure you didn't touch him with your little hand in his little face? But what you're saying about different kind of people, different, even dealing with authority that is wrong, at times.
Yeah. Yes.
And standing for yourself, competing as well in sports, getting your ass kicked, or even fighting in the playground. That's also a reality.
Dude, absolutely. Yeah. And there's so much good that can be learned that basically has to be learned outside of the home. I don't know how this went in times before there were school. Maybe it was, the fucking village or whatever. You fought with the other kids or whatever shit. But there's something about that. Yeah. And it's very important. And so that's the piece that I'm trying not to lose. The education part, I know I can do better than the education system because I mean I wouldn't even have to be that smart. Their shit's fucking trash, you
It's
know.
pretty bad.
I mean, you look at like people that come out of high schools here that can read like a sixth grade education. It's embarrassing.
Yeah.
I mean, our public school system in this country is a fucking joke. So I know I can do better on that part. The big thing is, like you said, managing like the socialization and the interpersonal conflict and all those other good things they need to learn how to do.
Yeah, yeah. Again, I know some folks that did very well with it. I know others that struggle a little bit with that or struggle a lot with that. And yeah, I guess that's one of the big problems. But it's going to be getting messy. I mean, I'm quite concerned as well with my youngest one. What kind of teachers and schools is he going to be seeing like in 3, 4, 5 years, 10 years from now? It's already a zoo out there.
Oh,
So,
dude, yeah, it's scary, man. I mean, it's really crazy. I mean, even the cultural shift that I've seen, just like advertisements and stuff. This is a big one that gets me. Fucking Chips Ahoy cookies advertising for Training Awareness Day. I'm driving around here yesterday, and I hear on the radio an advertisement for the preventive medicine for basically homos, only applicable to those born dudes, and so they can have all kinds of degenerate gay butt sex, and it's even talking about that. Like if you have multiple lovers, like you need to be on this, and this is on
this drug.
Yeah, this is on the fucking radio waves. I'm like, 20 years ago they would have burned the fucking station down.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it would have been a completely unacceptable to have that sort of thing, and it's amazing because it permeates everything and it affects everything. I think I mentioned this before in one of the videos. I like video games. I bought one of the last ones called Cyberpunk, and one of the reviewers gave the video game like a crappy review because it only had one transsexual main character in the game. One is not enough, folks. You need more transsexuals in your video games. In a futuristic video games that's all made up and complete fantasy, but you need more transsexuals. What kind of brain dead fool thinks that way? That you need a percentage of? I mean, that's the kind of world we're moving to.
Oh, dude, it's absolutely fucking nuts too, and it's I think it's had a different effect on at least on people like me than I think they think it would have. Because if you back the clock up 15 years ago, I would be firmly in the whatever you do behind closed doors is fine. Like I don't fucking care. But now that you're trying to push this agenda on the world that my children inhabit, like I'm definitely willing to get out the flamethrower. Like if that's what it comes down to, like I support ISIS style morality. If those are my choices, that's how it is.
Yeah, because like you just said, it used to be like, what do you do in the privacy, the famous words of what do you do in the privacy of your bedroom and whatnot, live your life. But that's no longer the case. They want to look into your bedroom and decide, I mean, you're a normal heterosexual male chauvinist, you're an awful person and you have to be destroyed. You have to be a transsexual, mixed, fluid gender freak show or whatever, because if not, it's not okay. It's not okay to be a normal person anymore. And it goes back to this idea that the left wing has of destroying the basic cell of society, which is a family. They just want to get rid of that.
Right. Communism 101. I mean, it's and it's working. I mean, it's working. I mean, our culture over here is fucking collapsing. And basically at this point you have to build big ramparts against it because it's going to just keep falling. Yeah.
It's man. Now, I don't want to leave folks with a negative, think that's all doom and gloom. Just there's things that you could. I mean, we're talking about that already here. Moving to a state that is more along the lines of what you think should be, normal society. Moving to a red state. Sending your kids to maybe homeschooling or a local community that you have more control over. That could be something else.
Well, let's give it a silver lining in this way too.
Yeah.
When you think about the Soviet Empire, from 1949 onward or so, that was the most well-controlled society that's ever been. I mean, it was something like 1 out of 4 Soviet citizens was an informant, and the jackboot was firmly planted on everyone's face. and they still fell apart. They still lost.
Mm.
So there is always hope. But you're going to have to fight for it. I mean, there's no way. You're not going to get it for free. There's always a way out, and hope springs eternal. And we will win. We may win in a much smaller landmass than we have right now, but we will win. But you have to be prepared for that conflict, and people should be ready for that anyway, because that is how nature happens. Like you fight for dominance, or you're pushed to the side, and that's just how it is.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, well, and that's what your books are about. So, anyone that wants to get prepared for this, they should definitely check those links and get the books. They're both aligned with exactly this that we're talking about here, preparing for this sort of thing. What would be like someone that's wondering what to do, organizing your community? You talked about networking with people in your community, getting to know that, doctor, sheriff, cop, military dudes in your community. What would be some of the other tips for folks to keep in mind?
As far as like how to recruit people like to your cause?
Yeah.
One of the great things about kind of being like the self-reliance kind of side of things is we're a little bit more loner, but we can also pick people up from the social gatherings that very much align to our beliefs. Like it was like 8 months into it, but I found out my jiu-jitsu coach really wanted to learn about guns, because it turns out that those same kinds of things, like learning how to fight or being fit, those for some reason very much align with like the individualist and kind of classic right-wing mentality. So any of those activities you're probably already doing, gun matches, whatever kind of bullshit, there's probably people there that you can feel out and kind of start to network with to do more than just, hang out with on the weekends. Yeah,
that's true. It's and again, that's something I've noticed in different countries. I mean, there are sometimes exceptions, but in general, if you go to a gun club and you're shooting a competitive shooting, practical pistol or rifle, you will end up 80%, 90%. It's gonna be like-minded people, as to put it. What kind of guns do you shoot for 3-gun?
When I was on the pros, I shot a Glock 34 because I was too cheap to buy a 2011. A Benelli shotgun, and I was shooting for the Adams Arms team, so I had a piston-driven AR at the time.
Awesome. Are you a piston, short-stroke piston, or direct impingement type of guy? Because that's something that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, man. I got to say, I'm normally a DI guy. I shot him in the military. There's not that many problems with them, especially if you replace the bolt head every 30,000 rounds or so. They just work. They just do. And to me, putting a piston there a lot of times introduces problems that you weren't otherwise going to have. The exception to that, I would say, if you're going to buy suppressors, I like piston guns better, and specifically, I like LWRC piston guns better.
Awesome. AKs. Trash can guns, as sometimes people call them, or not. I got kicked out of a fucking forum for that, because there was this guy that he was special force. I think he was actually fucking Special Forces Army, and he was saying that half of the AKs made in the planet do not work. And I told him, dude, you're a complete idiot. You're saying something that just doesn't make any sense. Whatever it is you came across, that doesn't reflect what you're saying. It's not possible that half the AKs in the planet do not work. I just got kicked out of that.
Well, I was never a big AK guy. Maybe it's because I was receiving into too many of them.
Yeah.
But I will definitely concede that they do work. They do work very well. All right, they are tough guns. Ergonomically, they suck. The recoil on them is trash compared to Western Army guns, but they do work, and I can't hate them because of that.
I think what happens is lots of you guys end up seeing very crappy AKs. You see complete shit of AK-47. If you go to Finland, they make those guns you wouldn't believe the quality of craftsmanship that they have.
There's a Finnish AK?
Man, they make AKs all over. I mean, or AK-based guns. It's one of the more popular guns you can have.
I didn't tell you this going into this, but I'm actually a snob for finished bolt actions. Like,
Oh yeah,
magnificent,
fantastic.
magnificent. Yeah, it
Yeah.
just leads me to think the Finns are probably the best weapons makers on the planet. Oh my god. Okay.
They have their shit together. They make some fantastic guns. I'm becoming a little bit of a gun snob here in Europe because sometimes you come across things that are, for example, the Manuran revolvers that I never even heard of. Now I have two of them, and dude, they're just fantastic. They make the Colt Python look like crap in comparison. So you start getting into all of these things, getting a little bit snobby, but I guess it's because of that, because the kind of guns you see in the Middle East, I would assume that they're tied up with wire and a broomstick stock, right?
There's a lot of bad stuff over there. Although, at least when I was still there, you would see occasionally brand new imported Iranian models that were fucking legit. I mean, I'm talking some like primo machining, like, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I can appreciate an AK. It's not on my favorite list, but I mean, I don't hate it either.
The ergonomics is quite crappy. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
I mean, as a basis for something more evolved, sure, but of course, with the ergonomics of the AR, it's definitely or if not a good old FAL like the one I have over there. That's another nice way to go. Heavy gun though.
I had one of those actually overseas too, and I was a fan, man. I mean, right on the free world, they did a lot of things right with that gun.
Yeah, it hits. I mean, it's heavy, but it's gonna be shooting that 308 like it's going down range like.
Right.
Hey, do you? I mean, what if you had to pick one or the other? I think I know the answer, but 223 or 308, which would be your way to go?
Ooh, see, again, this goes back to a tough call. So I spent most of my career as a sniper, both in the Marine Corps and in Special Forces. I was actually in a dedicated sniper unit over there too. And there was this ongoing like buddy chat on my phone between like 10 of us that were snipers all across like 20 years or whatever. And this would come up occasionally. And when I was a younger man, I was a 308 guy. I was a huge SR-25 dude. But now that I'm a little bit older and also talking to like 5.6 of my counterparts that always carried 5.56 at that same time. The 308
gun.
It'll do better through barriers, which is one thing I'll say about it for a battle rifle. But generally, I would probably be a 5.56 guy now.
Yeah, lighter gun, more ammunition. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. But for defending a fixed position, you have a bipod, nice scope. 308 is a good way to go.
I will definitely say this: the first person I shot with 308 fell over like the fist of God hit him, and I was a convert. I was like, I always want this fucking gun.
You were like, yeah, that's exactly what should happen when you shoot someone.
That's when I was like, come out of the scope, like, holy shit, yeah. So I do have a soft spot for 308 in my heart. So did he.
It's a big bullet. What is it, like 3 times the energy of a 223?
I'd have to actually run the math on velocity, but yeah, it's got to be close to that because the bullet weight's over 3 times and the velocity is not that far off. So yeah, it's got to be close to that. Yeah,
and also when you have those walls, I don't know what is that you had over there, like brick walls or these mud thick things. When you're punching them with a 308, it's not the same thing like punching it with a 223. You put half a magazine on, it's going to be falling half apart, right?
Anything in urban combat, as far as barrier penetration, 308 is night and day better. Yeah, absolutely. And also if I was shooting at relatively short distances, like under 600 yards, I would always have armor piercing in a 308 gun. I would even carry on occasion de-linked machine gun ammo for my sniper rifle, for my SR-25, just because it did barriers better.
Right.
And what you give up in terminal effect, who gives a shit? It's still a 30 caliber bullet.
Yeah, it's a big bullet. It's going to be getting the job. What about that? What I read in your book about SIG P365 being the gun you recommend. Why is that you're not recommending a Glock like any other civilized human being?
Right. And it's funny because I was actually on a Glock poster, and like I said, I shot Glock the whole time I did 3-gun and USPSA. I was a Glock dude. But the 365 is their little gun. And from what I've seen, having tested pretty much all of them, it is so fucking nice to shoot for a small gun. I mean, Phil Strader actually took it to the Bianchi Cup and did well with it. which is a competition for like bullseye-sized guns.
Nice.
However they did it, that gun just shoots so well, and it's got such a high capacity, either 12 or 15, that it's a pretty good replacement across the board for pistols. And especially if you could have like one gun to do everything, you should have a rifle. But if you only have enough money for one pistol to do everything, P365 is just, I mean, it's incredibly hard to beat for what it does.
What about magazines, spare parts, or that sort of thing? Is that something that you wouldn't worry all that much about?
Me with a pistol, I just don't worry about it. I say that once the shooting actually starts in earnest, a pistol's a paperweight anyway. The pistol's basically to survive all the street crime and stuff until we get to that.
Yeah.
So I just don't worry about it as much.
And that's what you carry as well. You carry a SIG P365.
Yeah, I normally carry either a SIG P365 or a Springfield Armory Hellcat, which is basically the same thing, same size of gun.
What is it, like 12+1 capacity, is it?
Yeah, the SIG is 12+1, and the Springfield is 13+1.
Okay, and what kind of ammo do you use in it?
I use this stuff called G9, which is kind of a weird bullet. When they first approached me to like take a look at it, they were like, it doesn't expand. It's an external hollow point. I was like, well, that sounds like snake oil bullshit. But then I took it out and tested it because the theory is the bullet actually has these weird cuts. Do I have a box on the desk or not? I don't.
Is it the one that looks like a Phillips screwdriver? The one that has that?
Yes, which sounds like shit until they
No, but it's not shit. It's actually very good because it has a very strong hydraulic effect, and it's a very light bullet, correct?
Exactly. What it does is it grabs tissue in those fins or cuts that it spins it like a hydrojet cutter. And like I said, man, I wouldn't have believed if I hadn't tested it myself, but I tested it on some meat. You could look it up somewhere. It's like G9 Clay Martin YouTube. It's on there. The 40 cal version was making holes like a 12 gauge slug. The 9mm version was making holes easily as big as like a 20 gauge slug. I mean, it was shocking. And that was on dead tissue. That was on like, pork roasts from the grocery store that have a lot less blood and water in them. So yeah, that's my go-to for carrying ammo.
How light is it? How light is that round?
I want to say it's like 95 grains. So because it makes most of its killing effect off velocity. So they've got to get the velocity up. Therefore, they got projectile weight down. But the other benefit of that is like you don't even feel a recoil from it because it's such a light bullet. It's crazy how light they are.
Yeah, I saw that, and at first I was curious. I wasn't, but man, the effect that you see in gelatin is definitely very clear, and it makes also sense in terms of how light it is, and it already has those fins. It's going to be displacing, combined with the velocity, it's going to be displacing tissue and matter and liquid a lot faster than a heavier bullet. So it doesn't need to expand. It's doing the same hydraulic shock effect, I guess. Then
it's crazy. Well, it's one of the things you have to be careful of too, because there's so much like bullshit in the gun industry. But that stuff delivered like it was supposed to. I was very impressed.
Man, yes. Is it maybe under a different name as well, like Extreme Penetrator or something like that, or am I confusing it with something else?
G9 is the only one I know of because they actually have the patents on it, and there were some other people that are using knockoffs of it, but there's like all kinds of shit going on.
Okay, so G9 it is then. Man, awesome. And the gun that you keep, home next to the, in the bedroom, or what would that be?
AR blackout or AR pistol and 300 blackout.
With a suppressor?
Sometimes yes, sometimes no. It's one of those things over here. You don't always want to put a suppressor on your home defense gun, even though it works better, just because the legalities involved.
Okay, I get it. The 300 blackout is a very nice round. Definitely a good way to go.
To the short barrels, it's a game changer.
Yeah. Is that something that the military is using, 300 blackout, or
that's who it was developed for? And I know there was some like procurements of like what would be smaller amounts of projectiles, like 50,000 or some shit. So I think they're probably using it now at or maybe they're still in testing phase at like some special operations units. But it's one of those weird rounds. Like it's only good for about 150 yards, but at room distances, I mean, absolutely lethal though. As far as that kind of thing goes. 30 caliber bullet at close to 308 velocities, or at least out of a short barrel. It's a pretty good mix.
Yeah. It's a nice. I don't have one. I should get one as well, because I like what I read in terms of the numbers, and it definitely makes sense. Like you say, like 100, 150 range makes perfect sense. Man, it's been great talking with you. It's almost like an hour. Is there anything else you'd like to tell folks? Some last piece of advice for what's coming? How
Sure,
you not get depressed?
Man, at this point, I just got to tell people, like, do not despair. That's what they want to happen. They want you to, go into this Christmas season. We just got our asses kicked in the election, and drink too much and get fat and jump off a bridge or some shit. That doesn't help. Like, we have to win, and you can't let them fucking demoralize you. You got to think. You got to turn into a vicious bastard and think, like, we're going to turn this around one way or another, and we're going to fucking win.
Yeah. I guess I don't know if you agree with this, but especially in terms of rights being taken away, don't give them an inch. Don't give them anything, because that's when you start losing. What would you say about that?
Yeah, no, dude, absolutely. Yeah, take your fucking mask off. If you have to wear one in a store, make them tell you to put it on every time. People actually gain courage from seeing people stand up to things like this. And I mean, you're having an effect on people whether you know it or not. Every time that you stand up to authority a little bit, you're helping the cause. So fucking do that. And like you say about rights, don't give them a fucking inch. Yeah, make them fucking take everything.
Yeah, because that's definitely something, especially in terms of guns, they're going to be coming after it. In terms of screwing with your kids, it's going to be. And I mean, we've seen this all year. People getting fired for what their wives posted on fucking Twitter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Or the kid that there was a fucking airsoft rifle laying in his room, and like the cops came over because he went to online school or shit, and you could see it. And the cops came like, the dad should have told him, get the fuck off my front porch. Like, if my kid wants to sit in his room with a 240, as long as I've got the fucking stamp for it, he can do so.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing that they keep going after you, and you get used to. And this idea that you have to be scared of the government, when in reality it should be the government that you should be scared of you. At least that's the way it was supposed to be, right?
Exactly right, brother. Exactly right.
Yeah. Hey, anyway, it was great talking with you, and I think we should do it again. Folks.
Dude, I appreciate it. I would love to be back on. That's awesome.
Yeah, no, definitely. We're going to be doing it more often, because I think it's good, and we have to stick together, those of us that think alike, and spread this message. I mean, because there's a lot of people that are just bowing, and even within the gun community, there's people that they just feel that if they fall in line, they're not going to be messed with. They're going to be okay. They're going to be left alone.
Exactly.
I mean, it may well be the case for them or not. Usually it's not the case. Usually they go down with everyone else. But
exactly.
But there's a name for that. It's called a fucking traitor.
Right, exactly right. Yeah, look at how it went in fucking England with guns. Hell, that took like 10 years, and they just cut them off at the fucking knees.
Man, I know a guy that, an English guy, he left because of, a former police officer, and he told me how he stood in line with his guns, with his, his little collection of guns, with his Colt pistol, 1911, all his guns, and surrounded. He said, I was being treated like a criminal. So in the police department, he was standing in line with all the other gun owners, surrendering his guns while being guarded by armed police, like he was like some damn terrorist. And he said, tough guy and all, but he said, I felt like breakdown crying because it was so sad to find myself in that position. And sure, he left that, and he's shoots competition and all that, but it's the kind of thing that once you lose, it's almost impossible to regain again.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You're not going to be getting those rights again. It's easy to lose.
No, it's fucking crazy. But yeah, you're absolutely right there.
Man, thank you so much for this, Clay, and we'll keep in touch. Folks, links for Clay's books are going to be there below. See you on the next one. Have an awesome day. Thanks, Clay.
All right. Thanks, brother. Awesome.
Take care, man. Bye-bye.